Hey guys, before we get started with today's episode, I would just like to announce that I have opened up a Patreon page for the podcast specifically. Like many other people at the moment, we have been economically hit fairly hard by the COVID-19 crisis. At present, we're actually producing about 250 minutes worth of podcasts per week, and I'm just looking for any small contributions anyone's willing to make, and they're all very much appreciated. If you want to head over to patreon.com/Kris Karl Photography Podcast, any donations are massively appreciated. I will be releasing some podcasts as early access on my Patreon, as well as some vlog style videos and exclusive podcasts that will only be available on the Patreon. So any contributions help, but let's crack on with today's episode. Start off with something a little bit different. I'm just going to ask you if you could describe what your job is on a film set.
Okay, well, what I do on film sets is I take photographs of the production for publicity. So basically, first look images and hopefully a poster, stuff you see online, first look stuff, that you see on some kind of website, something like that. It just gets people excited about doing, about what's coming. And sometimes, like Joker or something like that, it can make a really big impact. So a lot of people will work in TV or movies, not really crossover. I pretty much only work in film because you're hired every day, whereas TV, you're only hired part-time. And I got to pay the mortgage. So, and it's a little more, I think being on set every day, you develop a better relationship with people. It can also be torture. It can backfire, and an actor doesn't like you. You spend every day there. So, but I tend to work mostly in films. But I carry a couple camera bodies around all day, and they're attached to me, and it's a dream job. I'm shooting what I think is cool.
I think that's exactly the perfect description. It is the dream job. I didn't really realize that this job existed until I started to follow yourself and a couple of others. And now I'm just really pissed off about all of my life choices to date.
No.
In a sense, what are your responsibilities on a film set in terms of, do you have a brief of what's expected from you in terms of photos, but also what are your responsibilities in the way that you conduct yourself?
Well, conducting yourself is a whole different. So people who think they want to get into the film business as a set photographer, the thing is, being a photographer actually is kind of easy. It's what they call set etiquette, or how to behave on set, how to deal with actors, how to deal with producers and directors and the rest of your crew. That's the hardest, and that takes a lot of work. Taking photographs is actually really simple. And so technically, if you can pick up a camera, you can shoot, but being on set is a whole different ball of wax, which people a lot of times aren't ready for. And it can be pretty grueling. But it's pretty amazing. You're given a set. Okay, that was the original part of the question. You're hired by a film company or a director or an actor to work on a movie. Obviously, if they like your images, they're like, okay, well, come work for us. And the film company who owns the film rights will send will get in touch with you through their publicity department. So the photo editor will contact you, have a little voice meeting, and they'll run down a list of things that they want. I just did this movie. I did the Japanese leg of this new G.I. Joe movie. And I swear to God, I got a 5-page email with no spacing of 300 to 400 things they wanted.
Wow.
So obviously they went through the script and they were just like, we want this and this and this and this. And you look at it and you're like, oh, that's cool. I can't wait to shoot ninjas. You know, that's awesome. But then when you get there, obviously you're going to shoot everything that you see. You'll see something and be like, that's really cool. I'll shoot that. And you don't really have to recheck the list. You kind of know what's coming. You have to read the script, to see details and stuff. And, a lot of the stuff gets cut anyways. A lot of times we won't shoot a whole scene, that'll get cut on the day or something weird. But yeah, generally they'll give you like a meat and potatoes list of what they want. So during the day, what I do is I shoot as much of the meat and potatoes, meaning like the film company wants to be satisfied. So you want to get, the group shot, and then you want to get the close up and those kind of things. And then when I get to a certain point of getting all that and I kind of covered it, then I'll just shoot artsy shit, then I'll shoot like, I don't know, just fun stuff that I like to shoot the crew working. Mm-hmm. I like to shoot really, weird behind the scenes stuff with kind of crazy wides. I like to find angles that that someone didn't really see, like hidden things. Those are my favorite kind of. So, I don't know. I've been yelled at once pretty hard by a film company because I was taking too many quote unquote artistic shots. This was years ago. And then, and I felt kind of vindicated because I was working on this movie with Spielberg called The Post. And, I was in an elevator with him, and it was like the first week of shooting. I'd never worked with him before. And he said, my favorite stuff of yours is the really weird stuff that you're shooting, like the not the normal, dialogue stuff. And I said, well, that's my favorite. And he's like, yeah, it's mine too. So it was great. I felt this great vindication of, you can have your own style. You definitely have to cover their checklists because that's what they want. That's what they're used to getting. And that's my job, but if you can do something a little extra and just go that extra little beat and shoot your own style along with those meat and potatoes shots, I mean, fuck, it's great. You can have a style. You're not like pigeonholed into, it's a lot of editing, man. It's a lot of editing. And I shoot a lot of photographs every day. So it's a hard 16, 17 hour day. It's a lot of, you're running with cameras. It could be 120 degrees out and you're just in the middle of the Bronx on a street and you're carrying all these cameras and you're shooting, and then you're running back to the camera truck so that you can edit your images. If you're lucky to have a camera truck, in Japan, we didn't have a camera truck. I was editing in these temples up on a mountain, but you take your shoes off and you run. There was no heating anywhere. So it's freezing cold on top of a mountain. Your hands are numb. You're trying to find any kind of power source for your computer and you're editing there. And then running back to set to shoot more. So that's the other thing that separates the professional from the prosumer, I think, is editing. I think a lot of people miss that. Like, to me, 60% of my job is maybe shooting, and 40%, the entire rest of it is editing. Mm. And that's a lot of work, and a lot of people can't. I mean, you can shoot a lot less, sure, but I just don't do that.
You have to be very sure of what you're getting if you're going to do that. Like, you have to be absolutely certain every shot you're taking carrying its weight. Yeah,
and I don't. Most of the time, I'm just literally reaching my hand around a corner and firing off, 20 shots. I have no idea if it came out, but one might be mind-blowing.
Something I really want to talk to you about is that I first became aware of your work through images of the Joker and Irishman. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I read a post of yours and I'd love for you to talk about is that you had the opportunity to photograph Joaquin Phoenix's iconic dance scene from the Joker. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't really have a question. Can you just please talk me through that? Because I think it's just the most amazing thing.
Oh, well, he's just a magical dude. I had the best time on that movie. It was a tough film to work on, just because we were outside a lot and we were up in the Bronx. We were getting hounded by the paparazzi all the time. And, I really love that dude. It was so much fun working with him. And he kind of, when he was Arthur, he was very quiet and kept to himself. But when he was Joker, he was incredibly funny and very open and very, kind of loving to the crew. It was great. But we were shooting up up in the Bronx. I forget where those stairs are, but we walked through a pretty tough neighborhood, parked our cars, and walked over to these stairs, this big staircase. And for a while, the camera truck was on the top, and we'd walk all the way down, and I'd run up these stairs. And everyone was looking at their stair guide on their watch and just laughing because we would do, thousands and thousands of steps a day. It was cool. He was, he came out and, he just nailed it. It was one of those things, we had a big crane dolly up there that would pull back. I think, I was underneath the crane dolly, so my shots are lower, so it looks weird. He looks gigantic, from my images. From the film, he's a little smaller looking because the camera was basically directly on him. And as soon as the camera got past my head, because I didn't want to walk, the stairs were pretty steep, and I didn't want to walk backwards on those stairs. So I kind of stayed in one spot, and I used a pretty long lens. And I just, I tried not to cut his feet off too much, but I never, those situations. And in fact, most shooting, I never ask an actor to do something again for me. I know a lot of set photographers will do that, and they'll be like, okay, redo this scene or redo this little pose. The only person I ever do that for is Spielberg, because I'll mention to him, if I can't get access to an image, I'll just tap on the shoulder and be like, Steven, I need this. And he'll stop everybody from moving and have the actors reenact it for me, just personally, which is mind blowing.
Wow.
But actors generally don't, it's not the same, it's not the same. It's not the same energy. So I try to literally get as much as I can, with that. And I'll pose maybe one person per movie. It's not a lot.
Well, you also got a really fantastic shot of the bathroom dancing sequence with Joaquin Phoenix, which I think on your post you said that he performed it once or however many times for the film, but then he did it once more for you with the room empty because obviously it was a very tight space.
Yeah, it was. We a lot of times we were cleared out of the stage if it was a heavy scene or something like that. We were cleared out, and I don't know what that was. I think that might have been the end of a 17-hour day, and I have an hour and a half drive home, so I might have just effed off right before. And they tacked that little bathroom scene on. So, and Joaquin walked by me, I think the next day, and was like, "Hey, did you get that?" And I was like, "I couldn't get in there," and he's like, "Oh, I'll do it for you right now." So, and the hair and makeup people are friends of mine. So they're like, "Yeah, let's do it." He was supposed to come from that scene to do the next scene. And so so he did it for me. He was a consummate professional. It was really fun working with him. He was intimidating at first. It's like De Niro for the first time working with him, on Irishman. And I was scared to death of that dude, and Pesci for that matter, and Pacino. I was like, oh my God, these guys are iconic. I grew up on these guys, and so I just kept my head really far down. I used really long lenses and stayed way the fuck away. But by 2 weeks in, they were the nicest dudes. They were just like, yeah, whatever you need. And from then on, I was able to shoot whatever I wanted. There was even heavy scenes. I was right there next to them.
You mentioned being intimidated by the personalities. Are you ever intimidated by the sort of size of the productions, or is that just all what you're used to at this point?
When I had done a lot of Aronofsky movies, and then I did I didn't know Noah was big, but Darren keeps a pretty small crew, and he keeps all his people that he's always worked with together. So we're a pretty tight family. And then I got a call to do Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man Part 2 with Andrew Garfield. And that was because it was the only Spider-Man shot in New York City. And I met the director, who was super cool, really nice guy. And he dug my stuff, and he's like, yeah, come on board. And a lot of my friends were working on it, but man, we got to those first days and I was like, holy shit, it was huge. I mean, it was a 300 million, the DP, Dan Mendel, who's awesome. He works with JJ Abrams to the new Star Wars stuff, and he's great. And he just built these they built these giant sets, and they had, like, oh, there's, 2,000 sky panels up there. And you're like, holy shit, like 14 cranes, and they built like Times Square for like life size. It was nuts. And I'd never, and I was nervous too, because Sony was really freaking out on me about making sure I cover all the elements of his outfit, for toy companies and things. Like I had to do all these, I became close friends with the stunt guy who wore his costume a lot, so I could pose him and get close-ups of the arms and the web slinger things and stuff like that. I was always doing prop photos on that movie because they just needed high-res images for toys. I didn't fucking know that. I was like, okay. So that was really intimidating. And it was the first big film I did. But after that, it's all the same kind of crew. I love my New York crew. I have a lot of fun. And I tend to not go out of town that much, but I think some of the really fun movies are shooting somewhere else. Like the Japan, the G.I. Joe in Japan was so much fun. It was, it was tough because we were basically climbing mountains all day with our gear, and it was really chilly, but you get 30 ninjas running at you. It's fucking great.
Well, obviously, with the exception of climbing mountains and having to run around in temples with bare feet in the cold, just in a general sense, like day to day on all of the film sets you've been on, what are the lesser known difficulties of being an on-set photographer? What are the things that make the job a lot harder that people maybe don't even think of?
A lot of the work when you're on set is gauging the mood of the set. That's really can be pretty hard to do. It's almost like, are you at a party or are you at a funeral every morning? You can't really tell. You have to go in very tiptoey. I mean, I wear all black all the time, all year round. I wear gloves. I wear a face mask and a baseball hat over my eyes. I'm basically a shadow, and I don't really move that much. I kind of stand in one corner and disappear. And that's the best way I've found shooting, because I don't want anybody to notice me, because then the image becomes changed. And it also charges the scene a little bit much. It can be distracting if you're being photographed, even though you're being filmed. It's different because you're acting for these main cameras. And I always thought it was bullshit. I always thought it was like actor crap, but I kind of tend to agree. If you are sticking out and you're moving around during a take, can be really super annoying. And, the boom guy has to move, the camera guy has to move, but they all move as one unit. And the stills guy can you can float around, you can kind of be anywhere, but you can also really spook the shit out of people. So it's interesting. It's a lot. I think the hardest part is judging when to shoot and when to walk away, because you have to push the boundary of, well, this actor doesn't like me, but I still need to get these shots. So how much does the actor notice me, and how much does this actor who doesn't like me really gives a shit if I keep shooting? And they'll tell you, they'll say, get the fuck out of the room. You're like, okay, great. But you still have to shoot it. So how do you do that? You have to kind of play nice. You have to your set photographers are really low man on the totem pole, but when the image comes out and it's like a Joker film or like Black Swan or something like that, you're kind of like this unsung giant hero. I mean, it's before Instagram came out. It's pretty funny. People didn't know that shit. They didn't really know that much about who takes photos and stuff. But now that everybody takes photos with their phone, things have changed. People are more aware. It's not bad, or it's not like, anybody with a cell phone can walk in and take a photo. Yeah, sure they can. They get great moments, but you're not always on. Like, set photographers are always on. You're the switch. As soon as you walk in that door, your switch is turned on, and you're scanning for images all day long for 17 hours.
You mentioned Instagram there, and there's a post of yours taken on the set of Nerve, and the caption for the post was something fun to do when you're bored on set. And first of all, the idea to anybody that hasn't had the joy or the terror of being on a film set as a photographer, I can't imagine what it's like to be bored on a film set. But it's an amazing post of you with the cast of Nerve, all letting you take a portrait of them in a really particular, very artistic way. How do you go about building up that rapport with the actors? Because I'm sure they've got so many people that are always trying to get their attention.
Well, it's funny. Honestly, I think a lot of actors are kind of kept. A lot of actors get kind of lonely on set. I think because film crews usually have your set job, and everyone's pretty busy. And most people in the films that I work on are used to actors being around them, famous people, blah, blah, blah. And so they leave them alone. They know they like their space. And so in general, most people aren't bugging them a lot. To a point that, some actors really just want to hang out and like, hey, let's be friends, and I tend to not get super friendly with actors because I treat my relationship is very professional with them, because one minute they can be like your buddy and like high-fiving you, and the next minute they can tell you to get the fuck out of the room.
Right.
And you have to be able to swallow that and not take it personally and not go back to the camera truck and cry or something like that. You just like, okay, yeah, I get it. I'm bugging him, and so I'm going to walk away.
Right.
So, but if I treat it there's a couple actors definitely who I'm friends with and I've kept in touch with over the years and who I love dearly. And they're, they'll hire me on some films. When I'm working, I don't hang out with them. I do my job. In fact, I tend to not talk at all during the day when I'm working. And a lot of people get kind of weirded out by me because I pull off my mask and I'm smiling and laughing and I talk to people when I'm at a craft service. But on the job, when I'm hunting, I don't really like to talk, because then I get sidetracked and then I lose an image.
You've mentioned a couple of times about being hired by actors. How if you get hired by the actor, is that something they have to clear with the production company and the director before you're allowed on set? Or I didn't know that was how it worked.
Well, it doesn't really. It rarely works that way. It's mostly you're being hired by what's called the UPM, or the unit production manager, and they're the boots on the ground, and they know all the crew. So basically, a director will be like, "I want to make this movie in New York," and then they're like, "Okay, find all the New York crew." And the UPM is the one who basically calls all their people, and you're like, "Okay, cool, yeah, sure, I'll do that job." But there are times when you get to a certain level, which is great. I'm beyond lucky to be able to get to this level where someone like Spielberg or like Aronofsky or Scorsese, they want just you to shoot it, and you're hired by the director, which is great. And then there's kind of a rare breed of people who can get hired by the actor, which is pretty rare. I know, like Tom Cruise has this one guy who always shoots.
Right.
And he's been around forever, and he's kind of like the gold standard of these stills guys. But I get hired by a couple big actors who are, they're just the sweetest dudes. And I've kept in touch with them, and they're like, all right, well, let's go do this movie. And they usually have a lot more pull than a director does, kind of thing in the movie. So, and that's how you got, I don't know. It's a funny business because you're such a Ronin, you have a camera crew, and you have, you can use the camera truck, but your boss is usually really different. Your boss is usually maybe a producer, sometimes the director, but it's the film company, and they're usually based in Los Angeles and shooting in New York. Nobody really stops by. Like, you are on your own, which is amazingly great, but it's also can be sucky,
When you're hired on a film that has like the potential for spoilers, or there's a lot of press around, I'm assuming you have to sign like NDAs, and you have to wait to be allowed to release photos that you're getting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can't really release any images until the film comes out unless they do a sneak peek kind of image. And then you have to contact the photo department head and be like, hey, I'm thinking about posting this on my Instagram. Is that cool? And they're like, yeah, go for it. Or like, absolutely not. It's hard because Instagram is still new. Like putting stuff online, it's still kind of relatively new for the film industry. Paparazzi's been doing it for years, but they just do it to tabloids kind of thing. And now they can do it online. It's a little different. And anybody with a cell phone just takes photos and be like, oh, great. But the film company needs to use those images to release, to surprise people and get people psyched up. But generally after the film goes out worldwide and then it gets released on video and stuff like that, you can kind of you can post a couple here and there, obviously you don't post photos that make the actors look stupid. And, you gotta be really careful because it's a small little incestuous world in the film business and you can get blacklisted so quick your head will spin. So, you just, common sense. And, you always try to contact, but it's like some people are like, yeah, release whatever you want.
Yeah.
And some people are, like Irishman was like, fuck yeah, dude, go crazy. You're like, all right. And then, Joker was like, nope. So,
right.
Which is fair enough. The film company owns the images. You're only a work for hire. So it's nice if your name's on it, but generally it's not. So, it's tough. You see your images out there all the time and you can't be like, that's me, but you could, but it's just a waste of, it's tiring.
Let's switch gears and let's talk about gear on set. You have an amazing post talking about your black outfit, something that I didn't even think about, which was the dipped gloves and covered fingers, which I thought was fascinating. But in terms of camera gear, what are you allowed to bring on set, or what do you choose to bring on set?
Well, you can bring anything you want to shoot on set. And I know some people, this guy Wilson Webb, who's this awesome still photographer guy who brought a wet plate colloidal thing for Little Women and shot on, silver plate. That's awesome. I don't have enough time to do that.
Yeah.
So I have two Sony A9s. I started on Canon. I was always a big Canon fanatic. And I had one of those little Jacobson blimps that silencer ones, the housing. So it could be quiet on set, but you still hear a little click. I remember Steve Buscemi yelled at me because he could hear the tiny little click in the middle of a quiet scene. And I was like, oh, sorry. But now that cameras are digitally, the mirrorless ones, the mirror doesn't drop down. So you could actually get pretty good images. And I switched over to Fuji, but then it's some pretty heavy issues with the Fujis, build quality wise. And they just weren't, I was sacrificing one to save the other, and it kind of sucked. And then the Sony A9 came out, and I was like, okay, I'll try it. It was a freaking expensive camera, I went from Canon to Fuji, so you had to buy I bought two bodies, and I bought all new glass, and then I went to Sony, and I had to buy, and then I could only afford one body. So on Joker, I only have one Sony, and I had a Fuji. And then on West Side Story, I bought the second Sony A9. So yeah, I love my Sonys. They're great, but they're heavy, and you got to carry them around your neck all day. And the movies I shoot are usually on location. We're not really on a stage. So most of the time you have nowhere to put them. So you're running around with two cameras. I put a bunch of lenses and I put them in speed bags around my waist with suspenders kind of thing. And, I keep the cameras really tight to my body so I can run with it and it doesn't smack around. I'm nervous of my lenses hitting something, and you don't want to be walking backwards and one of your cameras hits the dolly while you're shooting. I mean, just stupid things. So the cameras are literally attached to my chest. And I look like a SWAT team guy, and it's just the way I've kind of, I've kind of worked that way, and everybody just calls me the ninja.
Could you explain the dipped gloves and the hiding the fingers? Because I thought this was fascinating.
Well, you don't want to have any color. God knows you put any kind of color on. I don't know. I think it's stupid. But, you just don't want to be, you want to be in a shadow, It's stupid, though, because I remember last year on West Side Story, we're literally on a street, like 130th or something like that. And it was so hot. The tar was melting on the street. And I remember one of the actors looked over me and was like, you're fucking nuts. Like, why are you wearing all that? I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know any different. Like, I don't know how to hide, like, without wearing all black. And they're like, well, you're kind of on fire, So, I've always worn that. On John Wick 3, we shot in this giant glass house stage thing, and it was at night, and I was the only one who could be in the camera. I was the only one who was allowed to stand in the entire crew because everyone was seen. Because nobody was wearing all black. I mean,
right.
It was amazing. I was like, okay, I just won't move. You won't see me. And so I've always done that. It's just easier. I don't know. You don't have reflections. You can stand right there. The camera has to get blacked out. Everyone has to get blacked out with, Duvetine cloth and whatever. But you can just whatever. If you wear Duvetine, you're good. But I dip those gloves because those gloves are hard to. They're really slippery, and you're holding a $12,000 camera body and lens, and if your hand slips, so I dipped them in that plastic stuff. But now I use black plastic dip, so it matches.
Some of my favorite images of yours are actually shots of like the crew, as you mentioned earlier. There's a shot, I believe the name of the gentleman is Bradley Grant, who was, I think, taking a break. He was a cameraman of some description. He was with a camera. How much do these productions take a toll on the crew? Because obviously you get to kind of see that firsthand behind the scenes. Everyone else just sees the end product, the polished item. But how much of a toll does it actually take on the people producing them?
Well, I mean, a pretty massive amount. I don't think there's one production I've ever been on where one group, core group of crew wasn't beat down pretty heavily. It's really hard, whether you're the effects unit, who can't get the smoke right because it's too windy, or you're the camera guys has a DP who's, always has a headset and is yelling at everybody, or if you're a makeup department and it's, it's too hot out for makeup to stay. So what the hell do you do when you have a director yelling at you? Every department had it. The difference is that when everyone works their 9 to 5 and goes home and fucks off, we're still have like a good 8 hours left of work. We work 2 days for everybody works 1 day.
Wow.
So it's brutal. And some people work longer than that and they get paid nothing, like the PAs will work a 20-hour day and get paid like $150, if that, you really got to love it. You really got to love it. And you got to love the crew. You got to love the people you work with, because actors come and go, directors come and go, but it's the people that are always going to be with you, are the crew. And you see it very much so, especially taking images. And it's tough because as a photographer or a set photographer, you want to be friends with every department and the actors and the producers and the director. You want to be, I wouldn't say friendly, friendly, but the problem is you get stuck in the middle of shit all the time. So like an actor will rip on you, but be really nice to your friends. But then a director will rip on your friends and be really nice to you. So you kind of have to just walk this fine line of like, you just nod your head. Yep. Okay. Yep. Because you still need to get the images, and, the director might hire you on another movie, or the actor might, it's a huge tightrope walk. Like I said, taking the images is just easy. That's just, you just position yourself and you see something, you shoot it, and trying not to talk a lot. and just being aware. But figuring out how to be around a pretty small community that's forced together for a really long amount of time to be away from their family. And if somebody's omnipotent and being pretty tough, and that person can be really high up the food chain, it's shitty. It's really hard. But you just have to, you're like, as my friend Joel always says, just telling a story. We're just telling a story. And, I mean, we're not at war.
One thing I don't understand how it works. One thing I'm really fascinated to find out how it works. So you have all of the lighting set up. You have the I guess the blockings all laid out before the lighting. Everything's kind of ready to go. At what point do you know where you're going to be, and how do you figure that out before they start shooting?
Well, we'll have rehearsals. Sometimes we'll have rehearsals. Sometimes we won't have rehearsals. But a lot of times, you have to time it. So I have a walkie that I keep on my body all the time, so I can tell when the actors are going to set, because most of the time they use the stand-ins to light and to figure out the camera moves and those things. And it depends on where you are. If you're inside a house shooting or something like that, you really got to stick around and figure out how, where to be. But if you're outside, generally you can just kind of like walk up and be like, oh, cool. What are we shooting? Okay, cool. But if you can get there for like the first actors rehearsal, where to be. Time, it's you and the boom guy and the dolly grip. Those are the three. Those are your two people that you have to constantly be. Where the hell are you going, and where can I be? And a lot of times, if the boom guy can't be anywhere but where you are, just fuck off. You can get another shot, from a different angle. The same scene, same emotion, but shoot it through a window. Like, I don't know. The boom guy has to be there. The dolly grip has to be there. You don't really have to be there. Right. If you have that ultimate power of saying, going to the director or producer and being like, I need this shot. I think it would be great. We need to get the actors in here and they can pose for me. But that is the biggest kind of can be a pretty dickhead move, because then the crew has to clear out. They can't get to where they're doing what they want to do. A lot of people, and the actors are usually pissed because they just want to get off the set and go hang out in their trailer or something like that. So I tend to never do that. If a lot of times if I can't get the shot, fuck it, art. I don't know.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I'm going to kind of go a little bit personal here from my point of view. Me and my wife are both absolutely enormous horror fans. Going back literally 15 years, or 16 years, that's how our relationship started, was watching horror films together. Does the genre of the movie dictate the sort of mood on the set, or is that just me being completely stupid and bone idle?
No, it's probably the polar opposite.
Oh, really?
I worked on a horror show. It was a lot of fun. Horror movies they tend to be more fun but they are harder to shoot. I gotta say, they are harder to shoot. I tend to just do dramas, and pretty heavy dramas, because it's the actors usually can kind of stay in character. But horror films, people, when you yell cut, everyone usually bursts out laughing because it's crazy shit. But in comedies, it's the polar opposite. It's pretty ice cold on comedies. I never liked doing those. I think I did one and it was really weird, but luckily it was with Paul Rudd and he was really sweet. But they're usually, comedians are kind of depressed, sad people.
Yeah.
Generally, I think it's tough. It's it's like a rodeo clown. They're like, be funny. And you're like, fuck you. But people who are be scary, people are like, shit, yeah, I'll be scary. I don't know. I think it's the opposite. I think I'd much rather do a horror film. If you told me to do a horror film, I would drop anything to do it. But a comedy, I would probably run. So,
is there any film that you wish you had have been on set to photograph? Do you have a favorite film that you wish you'd have been there to photograph?
I don't know. I never really think like that. I still don't think what I do is real. I don't know. It's weird. I didn't even think of myself as a professional photographer for years. I just felt strange. No, I don't. Maybe Requiem for a Dream was the only movie I didn't work with Darren. And I think I did every film of his, and I think that's where I'm kind of like, yeah, I kind of wish I did that one, but it was such a fucked up film that maybe I wouldn't. I tend to not think of that stuff though, like, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Indiana Jones would be great, but
So, I mean, just to go on the note of it being a dream job, I want to read off some names here just through flicking through your Instagram. So, Martin Scorsese, Keanu Reeves, Mick Jagger, Joaquin Phoenix, David Fincher, Lawrence Fishburne, Paul Giamatti, Emma Roberts, Darren Aronofsky, Emma Stone, Steven Spielberg, Jennifer Lawrence, Ed Harris, Kristen Wiig, Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, Hugh Jackman, Natalie Portman, Todd Phillips, Ray Winston, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Paul Rudd. I mean, those are just a few that I pulled off. Do you ever sort of realize the cultural scope of the job that you're doing?
Yeah, sure, I guess. I mean, yeah, I know I'm lucky. And I know I worked my ass off to get where I am, but
yeah,
I don't know. I think actors are really interesting, and I like directors and stuff like that, but I don't know. I always felt that the crew photos to me are much more personal and much more heartfelt, and they mean more to me. Mm-hmm. It's very rare that an actor who I shoot kind of blows my mind. Like, if I could shoot Tilda Swinton for the rest of my life, I would be a happy person. She's one of my favorite people I've ever shot, and she was just very accommodating, and some of my favorite images of her. But I don't get that much. It's interesting. It's a tough, I don't know. Usually when I'm hired in a film, if I don't know the actor and I'm like, okay, who is it? And then I have to just be like, oh God, please don't be a dick. Please don't be a dick. Please don't be a dick. Because you never know, you never know if someone like Adrian Brody is going to show up and fucking scream at you, or he could be the nicest dude in the world. I don't know. It's like, you really don't know. And an actor can be really sweet to everybody on set, but fucking hate you because you remind him of this paparazzi guy who used to hound him. And you're like,
have you ever had that?
Yeah, of course. All the time.
How do you keep your enthusiasm up? Is it just a case of just focus on the image and just get out off set as soon as you're able to and just do something else?
Yeah. You try to, you gotta shoot it. You gotta be there. I usually just try to play games and try to like lurk and find a place. That's where you fall in love with the crew, because the crew is there to kind of defend you, and I think the higher up with the director you work with, the much less the actors will do anything, because on someone like a Scorsese set or a Spielberg set, no actor would ever like put their foot down and get stompy. None of them.
Right.
But if you work on a lower budget film and a director is not really known, those actors can walk all over everybody. And they're just like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? And that can suck. And photography is interesting because a lot of actors just don't really like it. And I don't blame them, but an actor, like images from the Joker can help sell a film to make it a giant film, and I'm only trying to make it look good. I'm not like, I'm not posting images of them with their nose picking, it's like, it's like a shooting a wedding. Every single day you're shooting a wedding. You have to get a certain amount of images. You have to cover the bases. You have to make sure the third aunt gets her, shot with the grandson kind of thing. And if you don't, you're just like, oh shit, so you're constantly, but actors, I always go in, I hate to say it, and I'm sorry, actors, but every time I go in, I always think the worst case scenario. And I generally am I come out happier. If I go in thinking all the actors are going to be the nicest people in the world, I get shit on so fast, and you're just like, oof.
Well, that's the paradox of being an optimist, right? Because if you're an optimistic person, you're always expecting the best, which means you're usually disappointed. Whereas if you're a pessimist, you usually expect the worst, which everything is usually then a bonus. Yeah,
and that's the thing. Is like, my images, I only look at my camera for a heartbeat to make sure my settings are correct. I'll never look at an image and be like, oh, cool.
So before we started this, one thing I did mention to you was that I was going to ask you about a director that you'd worked with who's one of my favorites. So I'm going to have to ask, what is it like working on a David Fincher film?
I knew you were going to ask that. Well, it's interesting because, and it was a really strange thing because I got a call from his producer, his ex-wife producer, that she runs his film company. And she's like, look, David really wants to hire you on this HBO show we're doing. And he wants you to fly to LA next week to come shoot it with him. And I was like, oh, you mean David Fincher? She's like, yeah. I was like, well, how did he find me? And she said, oh, your website. And I was like, that's the great. So he actually looked, saw my images, found out who I was, and then had me go. So I went out to LA, and he's an interesting dude. So I get there, and he yells, cut. I was like running late. I got lost and like that. And he yelled, he's like rehearsing a scene. And he stops rehearsing. He runs over. I'm walking towards him. He's like, you must be Niko. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I'm so great to meet you. And I was like, dude, I am so not worthy of this. Like, what are you smoking? Like, how did you? And he's interesting because all I have to say is he's 800 steps ahead of every single person on the movie set. He's literally, his brain is, he can cover like if there were just robots that he could program and operate, he would make his own movies that way. Like he's a super control freak and he knows exactly what he wants. And if it doesn't land a certain way, he has to redo it. And until it's perfect. And to him, perfect is a whole different ballpark. A lot of directors are like, yeah, well, we got it, whatever, we got it. But he is just like, take 65. Like, just a camera, a couple of people just walking in the background, but it's the camera move. Right? So I just, the camera guys were just sweating bricks. And he liked me because he had hired me, and B, I tend to get the fuck out of people's way if I'm looking 180 degrees, and if I see someone walking towards me, I just step back or I step out of the way.
Right.
I know that my job comes secondary. These people need to get from A to B. And he had stopped one time and looked at me and kind of thanked me. He's like, you're the only person that gets out of my way. And he would constantly tell people to get the fuck off set. Like, get F-O. I say it all the time, F-O. And he's tough, but he makes you bring your fucking A game. And I fit in really well with him because I tend to just get the fuck out of the way. I shoot and I run. And he can be hard. And I know, he has this one photographer who shoots with him all the time, and he's an amazing photographer, but it might be a little acidic. It's tough when someone's that kind of brilliant and also kind of like rips people apart in front of everybody. And he was right.
Yeah.
You're like, ouch. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Maybe they should have not stood there. Yeah. But, I don't know. I got along fine with him. I didn't have issues. It was a tough set to be on, because he's very controlling. But you can see his mad genius. You can see he's always working. He's constantly, I would upload images to his iPad every day, and I would come home after like a 16-hour day of shooting, and he would already have put green check marks next to the ones he liked and then wrote notes to me on them. So
wow.
Not only is he directing this thing, he also had like 3 other projects going on. And then he would look at all my images that night and then grade them. I was like, this dude's insane. Like he's off the charts. I would love to work with him again. But I think it's really, you really got to be into the project and tight with him because, he's a tough dude.
What we normally do to end these is make sure that everyone knows where they can find your work to go and have a look at it if they have just discovered you. So what is your website and your Instagram and so on?
Well, my website, I haven't updated it in like 5 years. So I think my website actually just goes to my Instagram because I'm too lazy. So So my Instagram is just my name, Niko Tavernise.
Amazing. It's been so great to talk to you. Such an interesting insight into what you do. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for having me.
So